Hello, and welcome to the Usefulati, the show that turns the writing of the world's most useful people into audio episodes you can listen to on your drive to work. Today we have a blog from Casey Handmer, the founder and CEO of Terraform Industries, a startup that's turning water and air into carbon-neutral natural gas with solar power. See the description for more, and let's jump in.
This is a follow-on from my earlier post, now that the first letters prize has been won by Luke and Yosef, and we have this sort of data. A couple of years ago, this text was some ashy residue hidden in a charred, distorted scroll excavated from a destroyed Roman villa. 6 months ago, it was encrypted somewhere in a 5 terabyte CT scan file. As of today, relatively primitive software is able to extract and flatten large fragments of papyrus and automatically detect the remains of ink. We have drawn first blood. This challenge will fall before the might of our long-awaited and patiently constructed technical prowess. We will complete a task foreseen only in glimpses in the fitful dreams of 40 generations of scholars metabolizing their frustration with the miserably tattered remnants of our cultural and historical past. Prior to X-ray scroll discovery, a generation would count itself lucky to recover just part of one ancient text through palimpsests or careful cataloging of various medieval libraries. Since I last studied Latin around the year 2007, we have recovered part of a book of Archimedes and a few poems by Sappho via conventional means. Not bad going. When humans observe a task, mirror neurons simulate the feeling of physically performing that same task. Musicians in the audience are playing their instruments in their mind, and if all we could see was their synaptic activity, we would struggle to differentiate between the performers on stage and their fans. Likewise with literature. When we look upon this ancient text, our neurons fire in a particular way that no human brain has experienced since the last reader carefully wrapped the scroll and returned it to its alcove, minutes or years before looking out the window and noticing that the volcano had come to life. Recovery of ancient writing is cognitive archaeology. We have now, in our hands, the ability to move our understanding of the ancient world and, by extension, ourselves. We can recover this ancient library. Here is how it will work. Map the area. We know of one ancient library, but there are doubtless others, similarly preserved. Ground-penetrating radar can help us find other structures, treasure hoards trapped during evacuation, ships buried during the rescue which killed Pliny the Elder, and so forth. Modern radar technology is good enough that we do not have to strip mine hundreds of acres of Campania. Excavate known structures. This is a resource-intensive process. While ancient artifacts are underground, they are safe, although there is concern that groundwater could intrude into the lower parts of the scroll site. Italy is already overburdened with treasures in need of conservation. We should not excavate anything we cannot conserve, at least as well as burial for future generations. With the awarding of the first letters prize, we now know we have technology that can finally recover this ancient text and share it with all of humanity. In particular, the Villa of Papyri, the source of this ancient library, is still largely unexcavated. By chance, nearly all the overlying land is not developed. The only significant structure is a contemporary police station. Ideally, a state-of-the-art program of careful excavation and conservation can expose the ruin, which is currently only accessible, and not to members of the public, through narrow, dangerous tunnels, and give access to the unexcavated parts and surrounding landscape. A replica of the Villa of Papyri in Malibu forms the basis of the Getty Villa, and I see no reason why Herculaneum should not also have an accessible replica, complete with copies of the ancient bronze sculpture, built in an adjacent area, to celebrate the wealth of the ancient Romans and their legacy preserved by the eruption. If we are indeed able to recover most of the text of even the known scrolls, we will double the quantity of ancient writing. This photo shows the complete lab collection, text, commentary, and translation of essentially every ancient Greek and Roman text. It can fit on a single bookshelf, everything that has come down to us. You can read it all in less than a year. Imagine what awaits. When we complete the excavation of the villa, it is likely we will discover the main library and many, perhaps even thousands more scrolls. Richard Carrier thinks that in addition to writing by ancient scientists, female authors, and various lost histories, the collection may even include texts recovered from the Library of Alexandria prior to its destruction. Around 600 scrolls, most of them recovered from what appears to be a small storage closet, have been excavated and preserved, while many others were destroyed in the initial excavation around the year 1750 or damaged during attempts to mechanically unroll them. These 600 are kept in various libraries, mostly in Europe, and are adequately preserved. In addition to this collection, we will need to build additional curation capacity for newly excavated scrolls, both in Italy and in other countries, to ensure that no single future disaster can rob posterity of these artifacts. Mount Vesuvius is still a very active volcano. Fortunately, the scrolls are relatively small and have already suffered their worst indignities during the initial eruption. Locating, excavating, and curating additional scrolls is necessary but not sufficient. Now that we know 8-micron CT scanning is sufficient to recover ancient text, we should move with due haste to scan all 600 extant scrolls and preserve their structure digitally, while also feeding the pipeline for interpretation. One does not simply scan 600 scrolls. The high-resolution X-rays are produced by relatively rare synchrotrons and currently costs about $25,000 per scroll. While all 600 could be scanned for about $15 million, doing so would lock up the scanner for months that may not be available. We should definitely consider building a dedicated scanner in Italy so that any recovered papyrus can be immediately scanned as part of the curating process. Raw scan data could be made publicly available as the hobbyist scroll interpretation process becomes an industry. Imagine a world where the top 20 university classics departments all have funded, dedicated teams working collaboratively on scroll data processing. Even though the Scroll Prize has, thus far, shown a proof of concept, extracting every last character from every last scroll will require years of additional development and innovation. The text extraction process currently employs several steps. First, the raw CT data is converted to a 3-dimensional file using standard CT algorithms based on the radon transform, and this process can definitely be improved to avoid blurring. CT algorithms developed for human organs are optimized to locate density boundary interfaces, not papyrus fibers and ink flakes. Next, the 3-dimensional data is unrolled into segments. This process is still very labor-intensive, but the ultimate algorithm will automatically identify lots of locally continuous fragments of papyrus, stitch them together, then use a physics model to flatten the crunched-up carbonized surface. This flattening process creates a map which can be used to interpolate between the two different shapes, enabling us to form a lossless translation between the rolled data and an unrolled scroll. Next, flattened papyrus layers are fed into an ink detection neural network. While today's are relatively primitive, they are already quite effective. Future algorithms will extract all available signal, including partial data where the underlying papyrus is exceptionally damaged. Finally, raw ink data will be fed into a Greek or Latin large language model to perform character recognition, text inference, and even to fill gaps with textually appropriate suggestions. It may even be possible to feed syntactic inference back to the ink detection step, since the posterior probability of detecting ink where a character, word, or sentence implies it must be is higher than the prior probability. That is, the signal-to-noise ratio of ink detection can be improved by context, which is exactly how humans read fragmentary text or understand speech in a noisy room. Once the computers are done with the data, the resulting ink image and interpreted text will be reviewed by a growing army of classicists, philologists, papyrologists, and editors to prepare the definitive edition. In cases where the recovered text is already known, comparative studies can be made, since all existing texts have errors introduced in the transmission process. Last, raw data, segments, ink, characters, and edited text are compiled together and published so anyone, anywhere can share in this unexpected cultural bounty.